Very well. So, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for attending this long and painful paper. I am here today to discuss with you two late antique Latin texts from Egypt, P.Mich VII 460 and 461, the recto and the verso of the same fragmentary papyrus. I will offer you new readings on the text of 461, show you the possible nature and meaning of the corrections to the text, try to gather some context, and discuss with you a possible editorial rendition of this multi-layered text. So, Latin documents in Egypt. Is this strange? No, just rare. Diocletian's reforms at the age of the 3rd AD ordained for all the empire Latin language in the administration and in legal procedures. Schools were available till the very end of the 6th century in Alexandria, Antiochia, Berytus, and Constantinople for trained bureaucrats to be further instructed in writing and reading Latin, allegedly from native-speaking teachers. This is not to say that all provincial offices in the East started using Latin where they had before used Greek. Greek continued to be used at a local level among lower-ranking officials and remained the language of 99% of official communications, let alone everyday life, where it was joined by Coptic. But the higher powers, the emperor, the praetorian prefects, the vicars of the dioceses, send their messages in Latin. The lower ranks, when sending Greek messages, endowed them with Latin dating formulae or seals. And when you wanted to address a higher rank in your own office, not as a simple citizen, you did it in Latin. This is the case for our papyrus. The guys who drafted 460 and 461 was addressing in both cases a superior in rank, to whom he shows all the available courtesy formulae. We have some parallels for this type of low to high communications, recommendation letters in Latin, epistulae commendaticae, one of which is the famous Pistrasbe Inventory Latin 1, where Vitalis, a clerk in the office of the governor of the Thebaid, writes to the governor of Phoenicia, Achilles, to recommend to him a traveling clerk from his own office, a certain Theophanes. Then we have, and that's the papyrus, then we have proper petitions, the most famous and complete of which is the glorious P. Abinna 1, wherein Flavius Abinnius, prefect of a Roman unit in the Egyptian town of Dionysius, complains to the emperors Constans and Constantius II that when he came up with imperial letters assigning him to the command of his unit, there were other random guys claiming they had the same right because they had been chosen by the soldiers themselves. Abinnius points out that the Roman army is not a democracy. Therefore, the emperors must remind his colleagues that it is him, not them, who gets the position. Unfortunately, for 460 and 461, we are in the dark both about the sender and the addressee. And I'm afraid that also the main point of both documents is difficult to reconstruct. One thing I can tell is that they are not recommendation letters. They are too different from the extant textual samples of this category. Therefore, they probably are petitions or at any rate requests of some sort. In the abstract, I unwisely stated that Coprì was the sender of these petitions after some further months of work. I am no longer sure. Now for some history of the papyrus. P.Mich inventory 5756 was found in Caranis in spring 1930 and brought to Ann Arbor in Michigan, for they were the ones doing the excavations. The manuscript bears no date, but the writing, a beautiful new Roman cursive, goes back to the 4th century AD. The papyrus was photographed, both sides actually, you can see the photos. They were both published in the 7th volume of the Michigan Papyri by Henry Sanders, then in the Cartae Latinae Antiquiores. They were then given back to Cairo Museum in the 70s, and as far as I know, they are still there. Only that when I asked for better photographs, I was answered that they know nothing of P.Mich inventory whatever, and that I should give them the Cairo Museum inventory number, which of course I don't have, because they are the ones who should have kept the original inventories and matched them to new ones. There certainly is a catalogue, probably on paper, but they would rather have you die before they let you see it. In short, until someone goes there and accidentally bumps into this particular manuscript, it is as good as lost, And these photos are the best we have got to research on them. I mean, these photos, okay? 460, I repeat, is the recto, only the right portion survives. 461 is the verso. It was written along the fibers as well, so they had to turn the papyrus 90 degrees. Both were recognized from the beginning as problematic, first and foremost for their damaged condition, which, coupled with the back then unusual script, for you don't find a papyrus in New Roman cursive every day, caused much effort to the editors. 461 in particular is much worse off than 460. The ink is vanished in more than one spot and the fiber is much messier. No real second edition was given for it, only a few corrections. So here is what they came up with for 461. The transcription makes little sense. After some long and painful observation on the photos you have seen, here is what I could gather. Before we concentrate on the text itself, please direct your attention on a particular feature of the manuscript. In more than one passage, the scribe, who could clearly master Latin enough to produce a text from a few stock models and his own grammatical competence, has deleted with the long horizontal strokes more than one sequence of letters and has added streaks of smaller letters, most likely meant to supersede the erased sequences as corrections. This is a draft, all right. Do we have any other instances of this particular predicament on papyrus? Well, thousands from Greek papyri and something from Latin ones too. In fact, the aforementioned P.Mich one. Look at the very thing. This is the draft of the petition P.Mich sent to the emperors. And these are his corrections to the draft he was making, or that the scribe was making while drafting the text for him. We cannot really know whether he could write Latin at this level or there were professionals in his office who do it for him. As you can see, he follows a very clear protocol. He draws a line at the parts he wants to erase, and he writes the replacing sentences in the interlinear space. When he finds he has no more room, he just goes in the right margin. It is for us quite clear what he wanted to replace and the ratio he used. He starts erasing, and that's the new sequence in the exact point he wants it to be in the renewed text. So from this, we got this. It is a substantial addition. He had not included in the first draft a clear mention of the imperial authority backing his claim to the commanding position he wanted. I suspect that he also wanted to erase the full sequence soliti, that is solita, contemplatione memoratorum laborum meorum, for the customary observation of my aforementioned toil, instead of only half of it, or that he wanted to keep it in its entirety. It makes a good cursus planus. Such as it is, it makes no sense to preserve only solita contemplatione memoratorum in the text. But this is another story, of course. Do we find the same pattern in 461? More or less, yes. I think we can see here the remnants of at least 3 major sentences. The first ends, with prohibentur. The final R, is an elaborated curl, something which happens either at the end of this line, or at the end of a sentence. Plus, we probably have here a cursus trispondaicus, like esse videatur prohibentur. Not much can be gathered here, actually. Querere a instead of ex is a feature of late Latin we find, for instance, in St. Augustine. And the accusative instead of the ablative is a frequent occurrence in these texts on papyrus. Remember, those people no longer use classical cases in real everyday life speaking, let alone when trying to apply them to a language they don't really speak. We can see here that a word was added in the interlinear space, perhaps meant to replace the one below it, but the scribe decided that this addition was in fact useless and erased it. The second sentence starts with abeadem and probably ended with benissime, since icitur in second position is often found at the beginning of a sentence. Here the text begins to show some meaning. Someone should not abandon some people who are the object of an inquiry, and having remembered Coprη, will be able to relate something to someone quite high in the social ladder, ad auctoritatem, probably followed by tuam. Referrere instead of referre is a common mistake. Anomalies in conjugations can account for mistakes in conjugating. one would expect, if memorato copre is an absolute ablative, coprete from copres copretis, but this is what we get, unless this is copreus and not copres. What we also get are erased portions and substitutions, just as we saw in the Iovine papyrus. Some of them are quite easy to spot. Destinandum was replaced with destinare and then finally destinato. He was quite drastic in changing the articulation of his sentence, while vede is probably an aborted attempt at videre replaced with referre. After eundem, something has been certainly erased. I put it in purple. I am not sure whether these added lines in red and bold were meant to correct what was in here, but since additions could be very long, and here we read associare for associari, it may be that all this block is an addition meant to replace what was erased in the lacuna. A further remark is that after erasing the name of the civitas, here I wrote it, not above it, because there was no room, but further back in the interlinear space, here, namely. Unfortunately, we are not able to assess what was written before the correction and how the addition altered the text. One might suspect he was going to write iudicio sacro on imperial judgment, curae associari militari or militum, but he suddenly stopped and left the sentence incomplete. Destinato Romullo ad civitatem becomes therefore an absolute ablative, a condition through which, or despite which, someone will not leave the inquired after to themselves, and retaining copres in his memory, or with the aforementioned copres, will be able to relate the matter to the authority of the addressee. The third and last sentence is a final salutation with a praise. Someone is satisfied as he was before the order of the addressee. I don't think we have contentus ut plus subjunctive, who will probably investigate something. I guess re is for re, inquisita re, with penetration, acumine. If there is a condition here, it will be given, i.e. possible, through someone, for me to relate my small and humble necessities to your knowledge, my lord. If you have any suggestion on how to make this Latin sentence work, I am open to anything, because I'm desperate. I think eres is the principal verb. Probably a mistake for eris, therefore a second person indicative, present or second future, rather than an independent imperfect subjunctive. I have already some proposals for correction by colleagues and friends. Does 460, the text on the recto, help us? Not much. As you can see, it is in letter form, and it addresses much likely military personnel, a multitude of people, gravitas vestra, it's a plurality. We find the verb destinare with civitatem once again, and two recurring names. Copres, here someone's parent, someone who has just been mentioned, and domnion. Incidentally, wait a second, there's domnion, sorry. What do we gather from these two texts? Well, for starters, obviously, we are in the same circle of people, probably clerks in a provincial bureau. He who wrote these two letters or petitions defined domnion as someone responsible for something, perhaps an overseer. Something can be obtained through him, per domnionem, something must be asked of him, quere a domnione. Incidentally, domnion is an extremely rare name in Egypt. I find it only in this list of names, roughly contemporary to this papyrus. There we go. In a few cases are attested of teachers and governors of this name in Antioch and in Asia Minor. The name is widespread in the West. On the contrary, copres is common in Roman Egypt, from the Roman conquest onwards, I mean, and forms like copre, which may just justify our copre here, are also attested in Greek documents. Notably, an abbot named Copres, styled of course father, appears in Rufinus' Historia Monachorum in Egypto. Another Copres is praepositus rei privatae, or at any rate a minor clerk in an office pertaining to imperial finances in Egypt, in the 4th AD. Our Copres seems to be in need of assistance if one must not forget him. I doubt the scribe is Copres himself, speaking in the third person. The sender also seems in need of some assistance. He hopes a certain matter will be investigated, that he will always be able to burden the person he is writing to with his own petty problems. The Romulus PP is probably a Prices Provinciae or a Praepositus. We have a Prices Provinciae from Tripolitania in this century, but of course it cannot be proven that he is the same guy. I am in the dark as far as this Cephana Civitas is concerned. The reading is uncertain, and the only reference I find is this mysterious Cepha in Roman East, a city on the Tigris River, which was part of the Roman Empire till at least till the Arab conquest. There is also a village called Kephas, probably in Egypt, but it is attested very, very lately in the 7th AD. I'm frankly not sure. And so far, this is all I got. To conclude, some thoughts on how presenting this text. Leiden criteria would force me to insert the added sequences directly in the text, therefore producing the outcome you are now seeing. While I don't think we could have any alternative for online repositories, I think that in republishing this piece, one ought to preserve some of its layout, including the additions in its presentation, so as to provide some first glance rendition on how this scribe has worked on this papyrus sheet, and to inform the reader about what he should read instead of what. In other words, this is how I would like to present the text in a journal edition. Here too I am open to opinions and remarks, but thanks for bearing with me for this long paper.